Hello everyone. This is the 7th part of the story. Blade God of Blood. Chapter 13 Purple Man. Who am I? Where am I? And what am I doing? In the bright casino lobby, Tony Stark stupidly looked at the poker on the table. His mind was blank. He shook his head, looked around blankly, and found that everyone around was excitedly shouting something at him. Very neat. Tony shook his head again, and finally heard what the people around him were shouting. Undress, undress. Why do they want me to undress? Tony blinked in confusion. After a while, he suddenly recalled everything, and suddenly looked up at Burt Wong, who had a proud face. He gritted his teeth for a while, and he was tricked by this kid. The process is very simple. Tony Stark brought Burt and Betsy to a casino in Atlantic City. At first, they didn't bet against each other, they just made bets and played dice or something. As a frequent visitor to the casino, Tony immediately saw that Burt was a novice and had little experience, so he found an opportunity to play stud with Burt alone. In the first 3 games, Tony Stark won easily, but since the 4th game, he has been losing and never won again, even if Jarvis analysis function is used later analyzing the opponent's facial expressions, analyzing what the opponent's cards are, what cards the opponent can get, and so on. Generally speaking, Tony doesn't cheat at the casino, and he's not short of money, but occasionally it's harmless. But he didn't expect that even if he cheated, he would still be unable to win against the guy who was just a novice. How can Tony accept this? He is like a gambler who keeps losing, with red eyes, and so kept raising bets, trying to beat the opponent. This is not for money, but for face. He can lose everything except face, because he is Tony Stark. Then, like those gamblers who didn't believe in evil and wanted to keep playing, but lost everything, Tony also lost completely. Of course, what he lost was not wealth, but an unacceptable condition. Take off your clothes and run around the outside of the casino. If this is done, Tony is estimated to be shameless in the future, and his charming body will appear in newspapers across the United States tomorrow. Countless people in America are interested in his body, such as the gamblers around. That's why they shouted so loudly. You are not a novice! Tony gritted his teeth and said that as he thought. Before he couldn't notice it, but now he's awake from his anger. How could Tony not know that he was trapped by the kid on the opposite side? Tony felt embarrassed to be fooled by such a simple calculation. I'm just a novice. I have played on the internet, but in reality, I don't play much. Burt said lightly. He didn't lie, he was indeed a novice, but it didn't matter. He could see Tony's whole cards at any time, and even knew what cards were dealt next. If he could lose, he took all the cards get in. Tony asked again. You cheated, didn't you? It's familiar, don't talk nonsense, or I'll sue you for slander. Burt smiled and said, Cheating doesn't count if you don't get caught. Isn't that my line? Tony became more and more annoyed and wanted to punch the guy in the nose. The pride of the opponent, and the admiration of Betsy next to him, made him extremely unhappy. Tony closed the cards and said, Today I lost, doubled, and the conditions are fine. What you lose today, I will give you all of it, and give you 5 million more. But the conditions are off. Burt sneered. I have more money, so no. The gamblers went crazy and shouted. Take off, take off, take off. Tony was embarrassed and angry. He glanced left and right. Before he had time to do anything, Burt said, Tony, if you want to run away, I will let the people here strip you naked. I believe they will be happy. Very happy too. It was Betsy who shouted this, and the other gamblers cheered loudly. Want to try the taste of billionaire clothes? Tony's face turned red, and he couldn't stand being undressed, let alone being taken by a group of men. God knows if someone will take advantage of him. No, he is wrong, someone will take the opportunity to take advantage of him. It's cheap, and maybe they'll pull out something to keep as a souvenir. Thinking of the terrible consequences, Tony chose to follow his heart. He gritted his teeth and said, On another condition, I can promise to do one thing for you. In this world, there are very few things that Tony Stark can't do. Although admitting counsel, his tone is still arrogant. This is Tony Stark. If Bert doesn't agree, he will call the police directly and say that someone has kidnapped him. In this country, no one can force him to do what he doesn't want to do. Bert looked at Tony, and when he started to get a little nervous, he nodded and said, "Okay." Tony breathed a sigh of relief, but the gamblers were booing, thinking that there was a good show to watch. But this is what happened. Bert pushed out the chips and shouted, "The chips here are given to all. Whoever grabs them will own them." There was a sudden silence around. "This is millions of chips. If you don't want it, move away." The next moment, all the gamblers rushed towards the table with red eyes. The first few people successfully grabbed a handful of chips, but before they were happy, the people behind them shot at them unceremoniously and robbed them of their hands. Chips on. So, big chaos, a big fight, kicked off. Bert, Tony, and the frightened Betsy hurried out of the chaotic circle. Tony looked at all this excitedly and whistled. "Congratulations, Bert, you already have 50% of my true biography. In addition, from today on, you'll be blacklisted from all Atlantic City casinos." "It doesn't matter, I don't like gambling." Bert shrugged and said casually. Tony froze for a moment. It's a shame that he, a veteran, would lose to such a rookie. Bert put his arms around Betsy and said to Tony, "Let's go to the hotel, we still have a condition to discuss." Tony said angrily, "Let's talk in the car, I don't want to stay here tonight, I hate it here." "Okay, get in the car." In the white Audi convertible, Bert said to Tony, "Tony, I need a good secretary recently. Give me your female secretary, Miss Pepper Potts." "You want to rob my Little Pepper nickname?" Tony immediately refused. "No, change the terms." Bert asked. "Really? She's just a secretary on your side. Give her to me, she can be the president." "No, absolutely not." Tony looked at Bert with an unhappy face. This guy wanted to pry his corner? "Without Little Pepper, I don't even know what my social security number is, right?" "Can't you? Then I'll change the conditions." Bert didn't care too much. After all, he was only interested in Pepper's workability. He said, "Do you know vampires?" Tony sneered loudly. "Brother, don't watch so many movies. Where are the vampires in this world?" "Just pretend it has it." Bert shrugged and said, "Vampires are afraid of the ultraviolet rays in the sun, so unless they wrap themselves like mummies, they can't act in the daytime." Tony said impatiently, "Do you want to learn about the common sense of vampires with me? Please, there is a genius man in front of you." Bert sneered. "Then do you know that you will lose money tonight?" Tony's face suddenly darkened, and he said unhappily, "Hurry up and say the conditions, don't waste time." "I want to ask you to design something that allows vampires to act like ordinary people during the day," Bert said. "In simple terms, it is to design something to block ultraviolet rays, but such a thing can't make people feel weird. It should be completely invisible to people." Tony thought for a while, and asked suspiciously, "This thing is not difficult to do, but why do you want such a thing?" Bert expressed his surprise. "It's not difficult to do. As far as I know, vampires have not been able to research this thing for hundreds of years." Tony said arrogantly, "I don't know if vampires exist, but there is only one Tony Stark in this world. I can design this kind of thing in 3 days." "Then design it for me to see," Bert said. "By the way, the patent right of this thing must belong to me, because I want to mass produce it, and you can make a price for how much it will cost." Tony asked. "The patent rights can be given to you, but I want to know, how on earth did you cheat?" Bert smiled and said, "I have a see-through eye, so I know what your card is." "You think I'll believe it?" Tony expressed his disdain. "Do you know how much my IQ is, to fool me with this kind of thing that only children can believe? If I was 3 years old, no, even if I was 2 years old I wouldn't believe it." Bert smiled, took out a box of unopened playing cards, and asked Tony to draw a few cards. After Tony finished drawing, Bert pointed and said, 7 of diamonds, 8 of spades, 9 of hearts, isn't that right? Tony was a little surprised. He put down the playing cards, took out his wallet from his pocket, and asked, I still don't believe it. How much money is in it? Bert glanced at it and complained. You don't have one. Also, if you don't put money, why should you buy a wallet? This is a gift from Little Pepper. That's not the point. You can actually see through? Hey, wait, have you peeked at my body? Tony thought of something, and suddenly covered his bottom and shouted in surprise. Bert gave him a middle finger, opened the door and got out of the car, turned around, and shouted. 3 days later, bring the product. No problem, I'll let Pepper. Wait, you kid thinks about Pepper. Did you peek at her? Tony was like a furious lion, roaring at Bert with his claws. Bert didn't bother to pay attention to him. He closed the car door with force and strode towards his sports car. Boy, tell me honestly. Tony stood on the seat and yelled at Bert, who was sitting in the sports car. Bert returned his hand and pointed his middle finger, started the sports car, and took Betsy away like a lightning bolt, leaving Tony to eat the exhaust. Cough, cough, cough. Tony coughed for a while and quickly got out of the car to avoid him. He looked in the direction where Bert was leaving and thought fiercely. This bastard, I can't spare him. No, I must work out a method of preventing perspective, but what is the principle of his perspective? Can the eyes be turned into X-rays? It's not scientific at all. That night Bert, who was resting, suddenly received a call from James. He said excitedly, Blood God, we have found Kilgrave! What? Bert, who was still a little annoyed, immediately lifted the quilt and said, Where is he? He was shopping with that Jessica Jones, and my eyes are on him, James said. You didn't get close to him, did you? Bert asked while putting on his clothes. James hurriedly said, No, I'm very far away, and he will never find me. Bert said excitedly, Very good, keep watching. I will take a helicopter over there immediately, and find someone to get a few sets of biochemical suits and anesthesia guns, which will be useful later. Yes, Blood God. James nodded, again and again. He knew very well that great achievement was coming soon. Bert's movement awakened Betsy. She turned her head, barely opened her eyes, and asked tiredly, Bert, where are you going? I have something to do. Someone will take you to see Director Catherine tomorrow. Bert left a sentence and went out immediately. Kilgrave is so important. How can he be interested in Betsy? Who is Kilgrave? He is the big villain in the TV series, Jessica Jones, and likes to wear purple clothes, also known as the Purple Man. Kilgrave has an amazing ability. He can control others with a virus, TV version, and once controlled by him, you will do what he asks you to do. If he asks you to hit the wall, you will hit the wall and you will keep hitting the wall until he tells you to stop. If he asks you to draw a gun at some point to kill, you will draw a gun to kill. Very scary. Although Kilgrave can control people, he is no different from ordinary people. This is different from Jessica Jones. She is a strong woman and a future superhero. In addition, Kilgrave's control is time-limited. Bert doesn't remember how long it took, but it should be within 12 hours. After this time, the control will be invalid. Bert wanted Kilgrave's ability very much, so he asked James to find him the first time, and James did not let him down, and found his target in a short time. If this virus can be transferred to me, it will be convenient to do things in the future. Bert was so excited that he contacted the hotel and arranged for a helicopter to return to New York as quickly as possible. Atlantic Casino is only more than 100 kilometers away from New York, so it didn't take long for Bert to arrive at the restaurant where James was. Blood God, they are eating at the restaurant over there. James pointed to the pasta restaurant opposite and said hesitantly, Blood God, that guy is a little weird. Bert asked, What kind of weird method? The restaurant turned out to be closed, but he only said a word, and the restaurant owner opened the door to let him in and called the chef back to make a late-night snack for him. James said, Although money can do such a thing, I haven't seen him give money. Speaking of which, He doesn't seem to have given money to buy things before. People like him don't need money to buy things. Bert sneered secretly, so flamboyant, it seems that even without Jessica Jones, James can easily find him. Such a powerful ability, but it is too wasteful to actually use it to eat free meals, so let me put it to good use. Chapter 14 Unique Virus. Bert asked James, "Are the biochemical suits and sedative guns ready?" "Ready. It's all specially made and very effective." James nodded hurriedly, and then used the walkie-talkie to let the 3 half-bloods come in with the suitcases for biochemical suits. When these 3 younger brothers saw Bert, they were all excited and terrified. This was a blood god, and they could only look up to him. Bert instructed, "Put them on, and after entering the restaurant, don't talk nonsense, do whatever I ask you to do." "Blood god, do you want to go in person?" James said. "That guy is weird, let others deal with him." "Don't worry, he can't hurt me, don't talk nonsense, get dressed." Bert said that although he was confident that he would not be affected by Kilgrave's virus, how could he easily take risks with his tens of billions of net worth? "If I die, it would all go to waste, no thanks." So, he also put on a biochemical suit. When the preparations were completed, Bert immediately took James and the 4 downstairs and rushed into the restaurant. "You know what? My favorite food is pasta." Kilgrave didn't even know that someone was planning against him. He was excitedly having dinner with Jessica, and he took the initiative to introduce his hobbies. Kilgrave has not had this kind of excitement for a long time, because women are too easy for him to get. When he sees a beautiful woman on the street, he says a word, the other party will obediently follows him to the hotel. No difficulty. Jessica is different because, like himself, she is a superhuman, and Kilgrave is very excited to meet her for the first time. Unlike Kilgrave's excitement, Jessica Jones is full of despair at the moment. How can there be such a terrible ability in this world? She will do whatever the other party says, completely unable to resist. "Sure enough, you can't be a superhero, and something will happen when you do it." Jessica was full of resentment. She saw someone getting robbed on the road and threw the other party 10 meters away. Who knew that she happened to be seen by Kilgrave passing by, and then she fell into hell. "Who can help me?" Jessica prayed in her heart. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't even cry without Kilgrave's permission. At this moment, Jessica was stunned to see several people wearing yellow biochemical suits walk into the restaurant, and directly raise the sedative gun in their hands at Kilgrave's back. Kilgrave sensed the movement, and before he had time to turn his head, he was shot in the back by 3 anesthesia guns. The bullets in the guns were specially made. "Very good." Bert nodded with satisfaction, and was about to let James go to catch Kilgrave when other people in the restaurant suddenly rushed towards them with weapons. They want to save Kilgrave, which is the order that Kilgrave gave them before. Kilgrave is quite afraid of death and always sets various backup plans. "Shoot them down!" Bert sneered and gave the order. James and the others immediately shot at the rushing people. These people were just ordinary people with no fighting power. They were quickly shot down one by one, lying on the ground, and fell into a coma. The only one with fighting power was Jessica Jones. She lifted the iron table next to her and smashed it hard at Bert. If it was anyone else, they would definitely be smashed by a table and couldn't take care of themselves. But Bert just smiled, appeared behind Jessica like teleportation, and then slashed at the back of her neck with a knife. Jessica fell softly, as her vision turned dark. "James, carry Kilgrave and follow me." While carrying Jessica, Bert instructed, "Others close this place, and tie up all the people on the ground. If they wake up, give them another shot, and let them go after 12 hours. I'll get some policemen to come and help you. But don't say anything about this. When these people recover, warn them to shut up, understand?" "Clear." The 3 little brothers nodded again and again, and their expressions were very excited. The blood god personally gave the order, and if it was completed, it is estimated that there will be no worries in this life. "It is good." Bert didn't waste any time and immediately left with James, who was carrying Kilgrave. There was a car waiting outside. Bert put the two of them in the back seat and drove home as fast as possible. After returning home, Bert threw Jessica to the maid and said to the housekeeper, "Lock her up for 12 hours. After 12 hours, if she wants to leave, let her go. If she doesn't leave, just treat her as a guest." "Yes, blood god." The old butler didn't ask anything. After all, compared to the previous generation of masters, this kind of imprisonment game is completely unpopular. After dealing with Jessica, Bert and James brought Kilgrave to the secret room behind the study, where there was a small elevator. The three took the elevator to the second basement, opened the door, and saw a man who had already gotten his little virus lab ready. There were 2 virus experts in the virus laboratory, who were invited by James at a large price. When they saw the 3 of them come down, they immediately came to say hello. Bert nodded to them and didn't say much. These 2 people were inferior characters. Bert didn't plan to let them leave here alive at all. Bert said, "James, you go back and deal with the things I just ordered, and then go to Mercury. She will hand over the information center to you." "Yes, blood god." Although James was curious about what Bert was going to do next, he put down Kilgrave and immediately turned to leave because he didn't want to die. His heart was full of excitement, and he finally climbed to a high position. There will be more good days in the future. I didn't expect a mixed-race vampire like me would become someone of a high position, and all of this is because he followed a good master. After James left, Bert told 2 virus experts half-truths about Kilgrave's ability. In simple terms, when he opens his mouth to speak, he can release a virus, which can make people feel powerless. After listening to this, the 2 virus experts shook their heads again and again. "Boss, it's not that we don't believe you, but humans can have such capabilities," Bert said beyond doubt. "This ability does exist, don't talk nonsense, you should start checking immediately to analyze which organ is producing the virus." Although the 2 virus experts disagreed, the rich one was the boss, and they could only follow it. The equipment here is very complete. The 2 of them started scanning, extracting body fluids, and doing some experiments with petri dishes. After a few hours, they finally figured out the situation. The bald virus expert, who was still waiting to slap his face, excitedly said to Bert, "Boss, his body can produce some viruses. This is incredible. If the research is clear, I guess I can win the Nobel." Bert, who had not left after waiting for several hours, asked impatiently, "What organ produces the virus?" Another short-haired virus expert said to Bert with a scanned brain photo, "Boss, there is a mutant tissue in his brain, and the virus comes from here." Bert asked excitedly, "Can this mutant tissue be extracted completely? Also, after extraction, can it continue to produce viruses?" "It can be extracted, but if you extract it forcibly, this person will die," the short-haired virus expert said. "After this mutated tissue is extracted, as long as it is alive, it can continue to produce viruses, but it will die soon. This virus is not strong enough to reproduce in other people's bodies. Boss, I don't recommend extracting it, it's too wasteful, like killing a hen that lays golden eggs," the bald virus expert said loudly. "We should let it continue to stay in that person's brain, and then extract some for experiments each time. Only in this way can we completely replicate the virus and find out how the virus was produced." "Boss, I think so too." The short-haired virus expert nodded and said, "Give me a little time, I can." Bert interrupted the 2 experts with a rude wave. He said, "Extract the mutant tissue in its entirety now. Complete and alive." "Boss!" The 2 experts still wanted to object. Bert shouted, "Do as I say. It's too wasteful." The bald virus expert grumbled dissatisfiedly but still said that the riches are the bosses, and they can only do what Bert ordered. Although these 2 virus experts are of poor character, their professional abilities are still quite strong. They first gave Kilgrave general anesthesia, then opened his head and extracted the mutant tissue inside. Bert watched all this silently. He had no guilt about killing Kilgrave because this person deserved to die. Dying so unknowingly was already quite cheap for him. If it weren't for the special circumstances, this kind of person would have been slashed with 1,000 swords. The evil deeds he has done are indescribable in just 4 words. Because there is no need to care about Kilgrave's life or death, the operation was carried out quickly. After a while, the bald virus expert extracted a small group of mutated tissue and placed it in a petri dish. Waste too wasteful. This could have won me a Nobel. The bald virus expert sighed and gave Bert a dissatisfied look. He was illiterate, he didn't understand anything, and he wasted good things in vain. Bert didn't care what the virus expert was thinking. He looked at the mutant tissues and said excitedly, "Go back." Although the two of them didn't know why, they still obediently backed away. Then, they saw an extremely frightening scene. Bert's right hand suddenly turned into a mass of blood that kept moving, and the two of them stepped back again and again in fright. What the hell is this? Bert ignored them. He first controlled the blood to absorb all of Kilgrave's blood, and then let the blood wrap the mutant tissue in the petri dish to provide it with nutrients. Normally, it would be very troublesome to transplant this group of mutant tissues, and it would be impossible to experiment within a few years. But Bert is not a normal person, he is a blood god, and he can complete this process with an extraordinary method. This extraordinary method is to swallow Kilgrave's blood and then fuse the mutant tissue with the power of the blood god that contains Kilgrave's life breath. As long as there is no rejection, the transplant can be easily completed. Time passed bit by bit, and the blood-wrapped mutant tissue not only did not weaken but gradually became stronger. Bert laughed. His idea was right. This ability belongs to himself now. Bert took back the blood, re-evolved his right hand, and then transferred the mutant tissue to the position inside his head. The whole process went very smoothly. After all, in the eyes of the mutant tissue, he was Kilgrave. After doing all this, Bert looked up at the two virus experts. The two were terrified and pressed the button desperately next to the elevator. Unfortunately, the button didn't respond at all. Only Bert could open the door of the elevator. Bert said, "Slap yourself until I tell you to stop." As soon as the two virus experts heard Bert's order, they immediately raised their right hands uncontrollably, and then slapped themselves hard. No matter how much they resisted, they couldn't stop this action. "Very good, the virus is working." Bert laughed. What did he think? With a flick of his finger, 2 drops of blood flew out and merged into the bodies of the 2 virus experts, providing nutrition for the viruses inside. The reason why Kilgrave's control ability is only more than 10 hours is that the virus can only live that long, but Bert is different from him. Bert can use his blood to keep the virus alive. In this case, his control time is way ahead of Kilgrave. Not only that, Kilgrave couldn't control his abilities, he would control others as long as he speaks, and Bert can use it when he wants to without trouble speaking, like turning a switch on and off. I feel that I am invincible. After I go out, I will control the president first, and then the generals of the Ministry of Defense. The whole world is my own. Bert laughed again, but after only a minute, he gave up this seemingly good plan, because this plan was not feasible at all. This is not the ordinary world, this is the Marvel world. Do you believe that once the truth of the virus is discovered, those geniuses can configure the antidote in 3 minutes? 3 minutes might be a little high. Moreover, this virus cannot be controlled by anyone. In the original show, Jessica Jones got immune to this virus, and many superheroes are stronger than her. Bert doesn't want to be those stupid villains. This ability can be used, but it must be used quietly so that no one can find clues. Take it as the special ability of the Blood God. It is very reasonable for the Blood God to control others with blood. Bert smiled. Speaking of which, the vampires in this Marvel world are too bad, they don't have magic, and they can't even turn into bats as in the most classic vampire powers. Anyway, there is no one here in North America. I don't know much about Europe. I will have the opportunity to go shopping in the future. Bert said to the two virus experts who were still slapping themselves. Stop, you will stay here and concentrate on researching the virus for me to improve its ability. The two virus experts are naturally reluctant, but they have no choice at all. To avoid any accident with the virus, Bert did not leave here immediately, but stayed to do some tests. Be careful, after all, this is a god-level ability. If it is damaged, it will be a big loss. This marks the end of part 7 of the story, Blade God of Blood. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.